At 72, she returned to an abandoned home, but the fire was still burning, and someone was waiting. The road climbed higher than she remembered, winding through cold pine and quiet stone. Marlene hadn't been back in over 40 years, not since the day she left without turning around. But when the house came into view, something was wrong. Smoke curled from the chimney, and before she could knock, the door slowly opened. If you were in her place, would you step inside or turn around? Tell me what you'd do. The road narrowed long before the trees did. It started just past the last gas station outside Derby, where the pavement lost its painted lines and turned the color of old bone. From there, the climb began. Slow, steady, familiar in a way Marlene Whitaker didn't want to admit. She kept both hands on the wheel. 10 and 2, the way she'd been taught half a lifetime ago. The truck hummed under her, a low, even sound, older than most things people trusted on roads like this. It had a habit of rattling over loose gravel, especially on inclines. Today, it stayed quiet, as if it understood. The Bitterroot Mountains rose around her in long, shadowed ridges. Pines crowded the slopes, dark and tall, their scent pushing through the half-open window. Cold air slipped inside. It carried the smell of damp earth, fallen needles, and something sharper underneath, like stone after rain. Marlene didn't turn on the radio. She hadn't since Missoula. Silence felt more honest up here. In the rearview mirror, Boone watched the road behind them. He wasn't lying down the way he usually did on long drives. He sat upright, weight forward, ears angled toward the windshield. His eyes moved, slow and deliberate, tracking things Marlene couldn't see. "Settle," she said, without looking back. Boone didn't move. That alone made her tighten her grip on the wheel. He was 8 years old now, old enough to know when to rest, old enough not to waste energy on nothing. But this wasn't nothing. Marlene felt it too. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to awareness. Like stepping into a room where a conversation had just stopped. The road curved left, then right, then climbed again. The trees pressed closer, their branches knitting together overhead in places, turning the sky into narrow strips of gray. She knew this stretch. Hadn't driven it in 41 years. Still knew it. Her foot eased off the gas without thinking. The truck slowed as the grade steepened. Gravel crunched beneath the tires, loose in patches where runoff had carved shallow grooves. There used to be a mailbox at the next bend, painted white, crooked post. Her grandmother had never bothered to fix it. Marlene rounded the bend. The post was still there, leaning harder now, bare wood showing through peeled paint. The box itself hung half open, one hinge rusted clean through. It swayed slightly in the wind, tapping against the post with a soft, hollow sound. She drove past it. Didn't stop. Her chest felt tight, not painful, just full, like something had been waiting there a long time, and now didn't know where to go. Boone shifted in the back. A low sound, almost a breath, moved through his chest. "Hey," she said, quieter this time. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just watched. The driveway came up fast after that. It always had. A narrow cut in the brush, easy to miss if you didn't know where to look. Laurel bushes had grown thick along both sides, their leaves dark and waxy, reaching inward as if trying to close the gap. Marlene slowed. Her turn signal clicked on out of habit. There was no one behind her. Hadn't been for miles. She turned the wheel. The truck eased onto the gravel drive, tires crunching louder now. The incline sharpened immediately, pulling them upward between trees that stood too close for comfort. The engine worked a little harder, still steady. Boone stood. Not fully, just enough to brace himself. His nose lifted, catching something in the air. Marlene smelled it a second later. Faint. So faint she almost missed it. Wood smoke. She frowned. It couldn't be. Not up here. Not now. The house had been empty for years. Longer than that, really. Even before her grandmother died, no one had stayed more than a few days at a time. She kept driving. The trees began to thin. The light changed first, opening up, spreading wider across the ground. Then the slope eased, and the driveway straightened out just enough for the house to come into view. It didn't all appear at once. Just the edge of the roof at first, a line of gray shingles through the branches, then the front porch. Then the whole structure, standing exactly where it always had. 2 stories. Clapboard siding, faded almost to silver. Green shutters, chipped and peeling at the edges. The porch sagged slightly on the left, same as it had the last time she'd seen it. Nothing about it should have surprised her. And yet, Marlene's foot came off the gas. The truck rolled forward another few yards and stopped in the middle of the driveway. She didn't turn off the engine, didn't move. Her eyes fixed on the roof, on the chimney. A thin line of gray smoke curled upward into the cold afternoon air. It wasn't thick, wasn't dramatic, just steady, consistent, alive. For a long moment, Marlene didn't breathe. The sound of the engine filled the cab, low, mechanical, out of place against what she was seeing. "That's not," she started, then stopped. Boone stepped forward, pressing his front paws against the back of her seat. His head came level with her shoulder. His ears were forward now, sharp, focused. His body held still in a way that wasn't relaxed. He wasn't alarmed, but he wasn't at ease either. Marlene swallowed. The house had been empty. She knew it. The county records had said so. The letter she'd received, creased, forwarded twice before reaching her, had said the same thing in plain, official language. Unoccupied. Delinquent. At risk of seizure. Empty. She opened her door. Cold air rushed in immediately, sharper than before. It carried the smell stronger now. Wood smoke. Fresh, real. Marlene stepped out onto the gravel. The ground felt uneven under her boots. Smaller stones shifted, crunching softly. She closed the door behind her without taking her eyes off the house. Boone jumped down from the truck a second later. He landed lightly, despite his size, then stood close to her side. Not crowding, just present. They both looked at the house. The windows reflected the pale sky. No movement behind them. No figures. No obvious sign of anyone inside. Just that smoke. Rising in a thin, steady line. Marlene took a slow breath. The air tasted like pine and ash. And something else. Something faint. Familiar. She couldn't place it yet. Didn't want to. Her heart beat harder than it should have for standing still. She took one step forward, then another. Boone moved with her. The gravel shifted under their feet as they crossed the open stretch toward the porch. The boards creaked faintly in the wind, a dry wooden sound that hadn't changed in decades. Halfway up the drive, Marlene stopped again. Just for a second, as if giving herself one last chance to turn around. The truck idled behind her. The road waited beyond it. Everything she'd built over the last 40 years, Every mile that had kept her away sat in that direction. She didn't look back. Her gaze stayed fixed on the house, on the chimney, on the smoke that shouldn't have been there. "Come on," she said quietly. Boone didn't hesitate. They kept walking. Toward a house that had been empty for years. Toward something that clearly wasn't. Marlene slowed at the base of the porch steps. Up close, the house looked smaller than she remembered. Not in size, just in feeling. The way old places shrink when you've been away too long. The boards along the porch sagged slightly under their own age, gray and worn smooth by weather. One of the rail posts leaned inward, held together by a strip of newer wood that didn't match the rest. Someone had fixed it. Not recently, but not decades ago either. Boone stopped beside her. His nose lifted again, drawing in the air in short, quiet pulls. His body angled slightly toward the front door, not aggressive, not defensive, just focused. His tail stayed low, still. Marlene followed his gaze. The front door stood closed, paint chipped, brass handle dulled. The same narrow window set into the upper half, its glass clouded just enough to blur anything behind it. No movement. No sound. Except a faint crackle. Soft. Irregular. Coming from inside. Marlene placed one boot on the first step. The wood gave slightly beneath her weight with a familiar creak. It wasn't new. It wasn't alarming. Just remembered. She climbed slowly, testing each board without thinking, the way her body still knew which spots had always been weaker. Boone stayed close behind, his nails clicking softly against the wood. At the top, she paused. The porch smelled different up here, stronger. Wood smoke, yes, but also something else layered beneath it. Wool, maybe. Old fabric warmed by fire, and something faintly sweet she couldn't place, buried deep in memory. Her hand hovered near the door. She didn't knock right away. Instead, she listened. The crackling was clearer now. Fire in a stove, maybe the old wood stove in the kitchen. It had always made that sound when the logs settled. Her throat tightened. No one should be using that stove. No one should be here at all. Boone shifted. A low, almost inaudible sound moved through his chest. Not a warning. Not quite. Awareness. Marlene lifted her hand. Her knuckles brushed the wood, and the door opened. Not fast, not sudden, just open. The latch released with a soft click, and the door swung inward a few inches before stopping on its own weight. Marlene froze. Boone stepped forward half a pace, his body aligning with hers. The gap widened slowly. A figure stood just inside. An old man. He held a lantern in one hand, though it wasn't lit. The light behind him came from deeper in the house, orange and steady, the kind that came from fire, not electricity. He was tall, though his back had curved forward with age. His shoulders were narrow beneath a thick, worn jacket. Gray stubble covered his jaw, uneven but clean. His eyes, pale, steady, moved over Marlene's face without surprise, as if he'd been waiting for her to stand exactly where she stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the trees behind her, carrying the dry whisper of branches. The man shifted the lantern slightly in his hand. "You took your time coming back," he said. His voice was rough, not harsh, just worn down by years of use. Marlene blinked. The words landed without explanation. She started, then stopped. Her voice didn't come out the way she expected. She cleared her throat. "I think you've got the wrong—" "No," the man said quietly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't interrupt sharply, just answered. Behind him, another figure moved. A woman stepped into view. She was smaller, wrapped in a heavy shawl the color of faded cream. Her hair, silver and loosely tied back, caught the light from the room behind her. She stood just over the man's shoulder, one hand resting lightly against the doorframe. Her eyes settled on Marlene. Soft, careful, not confused. Recognizing. Boone's ears flicked. He didn't bark, didn't growl, but he shifted closer to Marlene's leg, his body angled protectively now. His eyes moved between the two figures, watching, measuring. The woman tilted her head slightly. "You came alone?" she asked. Her voice was thinner than the man's, softer. It carried something steady underneath it, like a habit of patience. Marlene stared at them. "I don't—" She shook her head once. "This house, it's supposed to be empty." The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. It hasn't been empty in a long time. The fire cracked behind them, louder now, sending a brief glow across the floorboards just inside the doorway. Marlene caught a glimpse past the man's shoulder, the edge of the kitchen. A chair pulled slightly away from the table, a line of light stretching across the floor. Everything in place. Her chest tightened again. "Who are you?" she asked. The man adjusted his grip on the lantern, though he didn't lift it. "Harold Brenner," he said. He nodded once toward the woman behind him. "My wife, Lila." Lila gave a small incline of her head. Her eyes didn't leave Marlene's face. "And you," Harold added, "are Marlene Whitaker." It wasn't a question. Marlene's stomach dropped slightly. Boone shifted again, pressing lightly against her leg now, grounding. Marlene didn't correct him, didn't confirm it either. She just stood there, the cold air at her back and the warmth from the house spilling out in front of her. "How do you know that?" she asked. Lila stepped forward half a pace, not close enough to crowd, just enough to be seen clearly in the doorway light. "We've been expecting you," she said. The words were simple, but they settled into the space between them with weight. Marlene let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That's not possible." Harold glanced past her briefly, toward the driveway, the truck, the road beyond, then back to her. "Still," he said, "you're here." Silence stretched. The fire inside shifted again, a log settling with a soft collapse. Boone's ears twitched at the sound, then stilled. Marlene looked from Harold to Lila, back to the open door. The warmth coming from inside brushed against her face, carrying the smell of wood smoke, of something cooking long ago, of time that hadn't moved the way it should have. Nothing about this felt right. Nothing about it felt entirely wrong either. Harold stepped back. Just one step. He didn't gesture, didn't invite her with his hands. He simply made space. The doorway opened wider behind him. "You should come in," he said. Marlene didn't move. Not yet. Boone looked up at her, then back at the open doorway. Waiting. Watching. Marlene stood on the threshold of a house that had once been hers, facing two people who spoke as if she belonged there, as if she had never left. The wind shifted behind her. The cold pressed forward. The warmth pulled from within. And for the first time since turning onto the mountain road, she hesitated. The cold air pressed against her back. The warmth from inside the house touched her face. Marlene stood between them. Boone shifted beside her, then stepped forward one slow pace. He didn't cross the threshold, just stood there, nose angled into the open doorway, reading something deeper than scent. Marlene exhaled, then stepped inside. The floorboards felt exactly the same. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the people, not the fire. The floor. Worn smooth in certain places, slight dip near the entrance, a faint creak under her left foot where a nail had always worked loose in the winter. Her body remembered before her mind could catch up. Boone followed, moving carefully, his nails clicking once, then quieting as he adjusted his step. The door closed behind them with a soft, final sound. The warmth settled around her immediately, not overwhelming, just steady. Alive. The fire sat low in the old wood stove near the back wall, flames moving slow and deliberate around blackened logs. A kettle rested on top, its lid rattling softly every few seconds. Marlene stood still. The kitchen hadn't changed. Not really. The table sat where it always had, solid oak, edges rounded from years of use. One chair pulled slightly back as if someone had just stood up from it. The cabinets were the same pale color, though worn darker at the handles. Copper pots hung near the window, their surfaces dull but clean. Too clean. Someone had been taking care of them. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. The shelf above the stove, the small ceramic jar with a cracked lid, the hook near the door where her grandmother used to hang her apron. All of it still there. All of it. Maintained. This isn't... Marlene's voice trailed off. She didn't finish the sentence. Harold set the lantern down on the counter without lighting it. The glow from the stove was enough. We try to keep things as they were, he said. Not defensive, not proud, just factual. Lila moved past him quietly, crossing the room with slow, measured steps. She reached for a mug from the shelf and poured hot water from the kettle, the steam rising in thin, white threads. "You'll want something warm," she said. Marlene didn't answer. She was still looking at the walls. There were photographs. Not many. But the ones that were there, she knew them. A picture of the orchard in summer, trees heavy with fruit. Another of the front porch, taken at an angle that caught the mountains behind it. And near the corner, her grandmother. The photograph was cleaner than she remembered. The frame, too. Someone had wiped it down, taken care of it. Maybe recently. Marlene stepped closer. The woman in the photo looked exactly the same as she did in Marlene's memory. Strong shoulders, narrow face, eyes that never seemed to soften, even when she smiled. Marlene swallowed. She stopped again. Didn't finish that sentence either. Didn't know how. Boone moved away from her then. Not far. Just enough to begin circling the room. Slow. Controlled. His nose stayed low at first, then lifted as he passed certain spots. The table leg, the corner near the stove, the base of the cabinets. He paused longer near the far wall, where the pantry door stood slightly ajar. He didn't scratch, didn't signal. Just noticed. Then moved on. Harold watched him. "Good dog," he said quietly. Boone didn't react. His attention had already shifted. Marlene turned back toward Harold and Lila. "You said she invited you," she said. Her voice came out steadier now, still tight, but clearer. Harold nodded once. She did. "That's not possible," Marlene said. This time she finished it. "She passed 3 years ago, alone." The words landed harder than she expected. Lila set the mug down on the table. "Before that," she said gently. Marlene frowned. Harold leaned his weight slightly against the counter, hands resting on the edge. "We came up here about 5 years ago," he said. "Didn't have much left by then." He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. The way he said it carried enough. Lila picked up the mug and slid it a little closer to the edge of the table, toward Marlene. "She found us," Lila said, "not the other way around." Marlene's eyes flicked toward her. "Found you where?" "In town first," Lila answered. "Then again later. Made sure we didn't disappear." There was no drama in her tone, no attempt to persuade, just quiet memory. "She brought us up here," Harold added. "Said the house had room. Said it didn't make sense for it to sit empty while people needed a place." Marlene let out a short breath. "That doesn't—" She shook her head. She never mentioned anything like that. Not once. Harold's expression didn't change. She wouldn't have. "Why not?" He looked at the stove for a moment. The fire shifted, casting a brief glow across his face. "Because she didn't do things to talk about them," he said. Silence settled into the room. Not heavy, just present. Marlene moved slowly toward the table. Her legs felt unsteady in a way she hadn't expected. Not from the drive, from something else. She pulled out the chair and sat. The wood was cool beneath her hands. Familiar. Lila nudged the mug closer. "Just water," she said. "It'll help." Marlene wrapped her fingers around it. The warmth seeped into her skin. Boone came to her side again, lowering himself to the floor with a quiet exhale. His body stayed angled toward the room, not fully relaxed, still watching. Marlene took a small sip. The water tasted faintly of metal and heat, like it always had. Her eyes drifted again. Back to the kitchen. The small details stood out now. A patch of newer wood near the base of the cabinet. A repaired hinge on the pantry door. The table leg, slightly different grain than the others, hand-carved to match, but not perfectly. Careful work, consistent work, not temporary. "You've been here the whole time?" she asked. Harold nodded. "Since she asked us to stay. And no one else." Marlene stopped. No one questioned it. "People knew," Lila said. "People always know." Marlene leaned back slightly in the chair. Her mind moved through it, trying to fit the pieces together. The empty house, the years she stayed away, the silence that had followed, and now this. Not empty. Not abandoned. Just lived in. Maintained. Continued. Boone shifted beside her again, lifting his head. His ears turned slightly toward the pantry, then toward the back of the house. Listening. Marlene noticed. She followed his gaze. "There's more to this house than you remember," Harold said quietly. Marlene looked back at him. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away, just held her gaze, long enough for the question to settle. Then he said, "You'll see." The kettle lid rattled again. The fire cracked softly, and for the first time since stepping inside, Marlene realized something that unsettled her more than the smoke, more than the people, more than the house itself. Nothing here felt temporary. Not the repairs, not the fire, not the way they spoke. This wasn't a place someone had passed through. This was a place someone had stayed. And somehow, without her, it had never been empty. The thought stayed with Marlene longer than she expected. It didn't settle. It moved, like something that refused to sit still in her mind. She set the mug down on the table, the soft clink louder than it should have been in the quiet kitchen. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady but low. "Has it been like this?" Harold didn't ask what she meant. He understood. "Since before she passed," he said. "Not much has changed. We fix what breaks. Keep the fire going. That's about it." Marlene looked toward the stove. The fire burned slow, controlled, not just for warmth, but for continuity, for presence. Someone had kept it alive, every day, for years. Her chest tightened again. Boone lifted his head slightly, then rested it back down, still alert, but quieter now. His breathing had slowed, though his ears continued to track small sounds, the shifting of wood, the faint creak of the house settling. Marlene leaned back in the chair. "Why stay?" she asked. Harold shrugged once. "No place better to go." "That's not what I meant." He looked at her then. Really looked. "Because she asked us to." It was simple. Too simple. Marlene opened her mouth to respond. A sound interrupted her. Not from inside the house. Outside. A vehicle. Distant at first, then closer. The low hum of an engine moving steadily up the mountain road. Boone's head came up immediately. This time he didn't stay still. He stood, moved toward the door in 3 quiet steps, his body angled forward, weight balanced, attention sharp. Harold turned slightly, listening. Lila didn't move, but her hand tightened slightly against the edge of the table. The engine grew louder. Gravel crunched outside. Marlene's pulse picked up. "Do you get visitors?" she asked. Harold didn't answer right away. "No," he said finally. "Not like this." The vehicle came to a stop. Silence followed. Boone gave a single low huff through his nose. Not a bark, not a warning. Recognition of something unfamiliar. Marlene stood. The chair legs scraped softly against the floor. She moved toward the window near the sink and looked out. A sedan. Dark. Clean. Out of place. It sat in the driveway behind her truck, engine off now, reflecting the gray light of the afternoon sky. No dust on it. No wear. Not from around here. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-50s, maybe. Tall. Straight posture. Dark coat. Buttoned cleanly. His shoes looked wrong on gravel. Too polished. Too precise. He closed the door without slamming it. Then looked up at the house. Not searching. Not certain. Like he knew exactly where he was. Marlene's stomach tightened. "Do you know him?" she asked. Harold came up beside her, just far enough to see past her shoulder. His jaw set slightly. "Yeah," he said. "Who is he?" Harold didn't take his eyes off the man trouble, he said quietly. Boone stepped closer to the door now, his body firm, his tail low, his eyes locked in the direction of the driveway. The man adjusted his coat, then began walking toward the house. Measured steps. No hurry, no hesitation. Marlene stepped back from the window. What does he want? Harold turned toward her. What they all want. Before she could ask what that meant, the sound came again. A knock. Not loud, but deliberate. 3 steady taps against the front door. Boone didn't bark. But he moved closer, positioning himself slightly in front of Marlene now, his body creating a quiet line between her and the entrance. Lila stood slowly. Her movement was careful, but there was something else in it too. Awareness. Marlene looked from Boone to Harold to the door, then back again. The knock came once more. Same rhythm, same calm certainty. Harold walked toward it. Not fast, not slow, just steady. He reached the handle, paused for a brief second, then opened the door. The man outside stood exactly where expected. Up close, his face was composed in a way that felt practiced. Not unfriendly, but not open either. His eyes moved past Harold, scanning the room quickly, taking in Marlene, Boone, Lila, before returning to Harold again. "Afternoon," he said. His voice was smooth, controlled. "I wasn't expecting company," Harold replied. The man gave a faint smile. "You weren't meant to be the one I came to see." His eyes shifted to Marlene. Locked onto her. Recognition flickered there. Not surprise. Confirmation. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "I was hoping you'd arrive soon." Marlene felt something cold settle behind her ribs. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he replied, "but I know you've inherited this property." The word landed hard. Inherited. Marlene's jaw tightened. "This isn't complicated?" He finished gently. "Yes, I'm sure it feels that way." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. Clean, crisp, official. "I represent a development group that has taken an interest in this area," he said. "Specifically, this ridge." Harold shifted slightly, but didn't interrupt. The man extended the envelope toward Marlene. "We've been trying to contact the rightful owner for some time." Marlene didn't take it. "What is this?" "A courtesy," he said, "and a timeline." Her eyes flicked to Harold, then back to the envelope. Finally, she stepped forward and took it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She unfolded it. The words blurred for a second before settling into focus. Property tax delinquency. Outstanding balance. Transfer proceedings. And one line that stood out more than the rest. 45 days. Her fingers tightened around the page. "What is this?" she asked again, quieter now. The man clasped his hands in front of him. "A notice," he said. "This property is scheduled for seizure if the balance isn't resolved." Marlene looked up. "That's not possible." "It is," he said calmly. "It's been building for years." She shook her head. She wouldn't have." He tilted his head slightly. "Your grandmother made many decisions," he said. "Some of them unconventional." The word hung there. Carefully chosen. Marlene felt heat rise in her chest. "This doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to," he replied. "It just has to be addressed." Silence stretched between them. Boone let out a low breath, stepping slightly forward, his presence solid and unmistakable now. The man glanced down at him briefly, then back to Marlene. "We're prepared to make this easy for you," he said. "Take the burden off your hands. Resolve the debt. Give you a clean exit." Marlene stared at him. "A clean exit," she repeated. He nodded, "Yes." The words felt wrong. In this place, in this house. Behind her, the fire cracked softly. Alive, steady. She looked down at the paper again. 45 days. The clock had already started, and she hadn't even known it existed. Her eyes lifted slowly, met his. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Not loud, not sharp, just clear. The man studied her for a moment, then gave a small, polite nod. "We'll speak again," he said. He turned without waiting for a response, walked back down the porch steps. Gravel shifted under his shoes as he returned to the car. The engine started, then faded as the vehicle moved back down the mountain road. Silence returned, but it felt different now. Heavier, defined. Marlene stood in the doorway, the paper still in her hand. Behind her, the house waited, not empty, never empty, but now at risk. And for the first time since stepping inside, she understood something had already begun, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. The silence after the car left felt thinner, like something had been pulled tight and hadn't yet snapped. Marlene closed the door slowly behind her. The latch clicked into place with a quiet finality. Inside, the warmth of the kitchen didn't feel as steady anymore. It was the same fire, the same kettle, the same room. But now there was a number sitting in the back of her mind. 45 days. It moved through everything she saw. Harold returned to the counter, but he didn't sit. Lila lowered herself carefully into the chair near the stove, her hands resting in her lap, fingers still. Boone remained standing. He hadn't relaxed since the man arrived. Now, instead of watching the door, he turned his attention inward, toward the house. Marlene noticed. His ears shifted, not toward sound, toward something else. She folded the paper once, then again, set it on the table without looking at it. "What didn't I know?" she asked. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. Harold didn't answer right away. He picked up the lantern again, though he didn't light it, turning it slowly in his hands. "A lot," he said. Marlene gave a short, humorless breath. "That's clear." Lila glanced toward the paper on the table. She never liked talking about money, she said, or what came with it. Marlene leaned against the edge of the table. She didn't have money to talk about. Harold's eyes lifted. "She had enough," he said, "just not for herself." The words landed and stayed there. Marlene didn't respond. She didn't know how. Boone moved then. Not toward her, not toward the door, toward the far wall, the pantry. Marlene's eyes followed him. He approached slowly, his steps quiet against the wood floor, his nose lowered near the base of the door, tracing along the seam where it met the floorboards. He paused, then pressed his nose closer, inhaled, once, twice. Then he stepped back, looked at the floor, not the door, the floor beneath it. Marlene straightened. "What is it?" she asked. Boone didn't look at her. He lowered his head again. This time his paw came forward. Light. Careful. He touched the wood once. Then again. A soft scratching sound followed. Not frantic, not urgent, intentional. Marlene pushed off the table and walked toward him. The floor here looked no different than anywhere else. Same boards, same grain, same wear. But Boone stayed fixed on one spot. He tapped it again. Once. Then looked up at her. That was enough. Marlene crouched down, her fingers pressed against the wood. It felt solid. Cold. She ran her hand across it. Something caught. Not a gap. Not exactly. But a difference. Barely there. Her fingernail traced the edge again. There. A seam, cleaner than the others. Harold had stepped closer now. He didn't speak, just watched. Marlene pressed down. Nothing. She shifted her weight, pressed harder. The board didn't move. Boone gave a low breath, stepping slightly to the side, giving her space. "Do you have something to pry this up?" she asked. Harold nodded once. "Give me a second." He moved toward the back of the room, disappearing briefly into a small side space Marlene remembered as a storage area. Lila stayed where she was, watching. Not surprised, not confused, just waiting. Marlene sat back on her heels. Her pulse had picked up again. Not fear. Anticipation. The kind that comes when something long buried begins to surface. Harold returned with a flat metal tool, worn, edges smoothed from use. He handed it to her without a word. Marlene slid the edge into the seam. It resisted at first, then gave. A soft crack. The sound of old wood releasing. She worked it slowly, careful not to split the board. Boone leaned in slightly, watching every movement. The edge lifted, just enough. Marlene shifted her grip and pulled. The board came free with a dull, hollow sound. Underneath, darkness. A narrow space cut between the beams. Marlene leaned closer. The smell rose first. Old paper, dry, faintly sweet, and something else beneath it. Spices, cinnamon maybe, or something close to it. Her chest tightened. She reached down. Her fingers brushed against something solid. A box. Wooden. Small enough to fit between the beams. She pulled it out slowly. Set it on the floor beside her. The surface was worn, edges softened by time. The lid had no lock, no markings. Just use. Harold crouched down across from her. "You didn't know about this," he said. It wasn't a question. Marlene shook her head, no. Lila's voice came from behind them. "She never showed it to anyone," she said. Marlene placed her hand on the lid. Paused. Boone sat down beside her now, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him against her arm. Still. Present. She lifted the lid. Inside. Paper. Stacks of it. Not loose. Organized. Carefully. Notebooks, envelopes, folded documents tied with thin pieces of string. The top notebook was worn, its cover a faded brown cloth. The edges were darkened from years of handling. Marlene picked it up. It felt heavier than it looked. She opened it. The first page, handwriting. Familiar. So familiar it made her throat tighten before she could read a single word. Her grandmother's. Careful. Steady. The same script that had written grocery lists, birthday cards, notes left on the kitchen table. Marlene didn't read out loud. Her eyes moved slowly across the page. Dates. Names. Short entries, not stories, records. She turned the page, more of the same. Another. Her breathing slowed, then changed. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice barely carried. Harold exhaled quietly. That, he said, is what she kept to herself. Marlene turned another page. Numbers now, amounts, notes written beside them. Short, direct, paid for wood, covered hospital visit, winter supplies. Her hand stilled. The room seemed to shift around her. Boone didn't move. Lila stood slowly, coming closer now, one hand resting lightly on the back of a chair for balance. She didn't want people knowing, Lila said. Marlene looked up. Knowing what? Lila met her eyes. That she was the reason some of us made it through the year. The words settled into the room, into the floor, into the space beneath the boards where the box had been hidden. Marlene looked back down at the notebook. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the pages. Quiet. Consistent. Deliberate. A life she had never seen. A life that had been right here, all along. Boone lowered his head slowly, resting it against her knee. Not urgent. Not protective. Just there, as if to anchor her to something real. Marlene turned one more page, and for the first time since opening the box, she felt something shift inside her. Not understanding. Not yet. But something deeper than curiosity. Something heavier. Something that made the number on the paper at the table, 45 days, feel different now. Not smaller. Just connected. And whatever this was, it was only beginning to show itself. Marlene didn't close the notebook. She kept turning pages. Slow at first, then slower. Each line carried weight in a way she couldn't explain yet. Names she didn't recognize. Dates stretching back years, decades even. Small notes written beside each one. Practical, direct, no emotion in the words themselves. But something lived underneath them. She reached the middle of the book and stopped. A name. Brenner. Her eyes lifted. Harold didn't look away. Page number? He asked quietly. Marlene glanced down again. Doesn't have one. He nodded. It wouldn't. She read the line again. Brenner H and L. Furnace repair, winter of 18. Her fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the paper. You were here before that, she said. Harold gave a small nod. Barely. Lila stepped closer, lowering herself into the chair across from Marlene. Her movements were slower now, more careful than before, but her voice stayed steady. That was the winter we thought we weren't going to make it, she said. Marlene looked up. You didn't tell her? Lila shook her head. We didn't have to. Silence followed. Not empty. Full. Marlene turned the page. More names. Different ones. Some repeated over the years. The amounts changed. Sometimes small, sometimes not. She flipped again. And again. Her breathing had changed now. Not fast. Not uneven. Just different. Measured. Like she was trying to keep pace with something larger than she could hold all at once. She paid all this? Marlene asked. Harold answered. She made sure things kept going. That's not the same. It is up here. Marlene closed the notebook halfway. Not fully. Just enough to pause. This doesn't make sense, she said. She didn't have that kind of money. Lila's gaze shifted briefly toward the window, then back again. She didn't spend much on herself, she said. That adds up over time. Marlene let out a quiet breath. That's not enough to explain this. No, Harold said. It isn't. The room settled again. The fire shifted. Boone lifted his head slightly, then rested it again, but his eyes stayed open now, watching the movement of hands, the rhythm of voices. Marlene opened the notebook fully again. Further in. The handwriting stayed the same. Steady. But the entries began to change. More frequent. Larger amounts. More notes. Winter fuel. Medical bills. Equipment repair. Then, one entry that stopped her. Pratt. Heart procedure deposit. Her fingers froze. Pratt? She said. Lila's hand moved slightly against the table. That's me, she said. Marlene looked up sharply. How much? Lila didn't answer. Harold did. Enough. Marlene turned the page back. Read it again. The number sat there, clear, unmistakable. Her stomach dropped. That's not small, she said. No, Harold replied. That's not help, she said. No, that's everything. Harold didn't argue, because he didn't need to. Marlene sat back slightly. The chair creaked under her weight. Her eyes moved across the page again, slower now, as if the numbers might shift if she looked long enough. They didn't tell me any of this, she said. Lila's voice stayed soft. She didn't want you to carry it. I should have known. Harold shook his head. You weren't meant to. Marlene looked at him. That doesn't make sense either. It does if you knew her. Marlene's jaw tightened. I did know her. Harold didn't respond right away. Then, carefully, you knew part of her. The words landed harder than anything else had so far. Marlene looked away, back to the notebook. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the page. Clear, precise, unapologetic. No explanations, no justifications. Just record after record of what had been given away. Quietly, consistently, without asking for anything back. Marlene turned another page. The entries thinned out, more spaced, more deliberate. Near the bottom of the page, a final line. No name, just a note. Deferred tax payment. Her breath caught. She read it again. Deferred. Not missed. Not forgotten. Deferred. She flipped forward. No more entries. The rest of the notebook remained blank. Marlene closed it slowly this time. Her hands rested on the cover. The room felt smaller. Or maybe she felt larger inside it. She wasn't sure. She chose this, Marlene said. Not a question. A realization. Harold nodded once. She always did. Marlene looked at the table, at the folded paper she'd set there earlier, the one with the deadline. 45 days. It sat there now like something unfinished, something incomplete. Her eyes moved between the notebook and the paper, then back again. The connection was clear now, not in detail, but in shape, in direction. Her grandmother hadn't lost track of the house. She had made a decision, a long time ago, and kept making it, over and over, until there was nothing left to defer. Boone shifted beside her, pressed his weight slightly into her leg. Not heavy, just enough to be felt. Marlene placed a hand on his back. His fur was warm, steady, real. She looked at Harold. At the end, she said, "Did she know?" Harold's eyes didn't move. She knew exactly what she was doing. Lila added quietly, she didn't regret it. Marlene swallowed. Her throat felt tight, not from emotion alone, from the way everything had changed shape so quickly. The house, the past, the silence she had carried for decades. None of it looked the same anymore. And the number, 45 days, no longer felt like a surprise. It felt like something that had been waiting. For her. For this moment. For this understanding. Marlene looked down at the notebook one last time, then over at the paper, then back to Harold. "What happens if I don't fix it?" she asked. Harold didn't hesitate. "They take the house." The answer was simple. Final. Marlene nodded once. Her hand rested on Boone's back, fingers pressing slightly into his fur without thinking. The fire cracked behind them. The kettle rattled once more. And for the first time since she arrived, Marlene wasn't wondering who had been inside the house. She was wondering what it had been holding, and why it had waited for her to see it now. The answer didn't come all at once. It settled slowly, like dust in a room that had been closed too long. Marlene stood from the table. The chair legs scraped softly behind her. She needed air, not the kind inside the house, the kind that moved, the kind that didn't carry memory in every corner. "I'm going outside," she said. Neither Harold nor Lila stopped her. Boone rose immediately, falling into step beside her without being called. The front door opened with the same quiet resistance. The cold met her again. Sharper now. Cleaner. She stepped off the porch and into the yard. The trees stood still around her, tall and indifferent. The sky had dimmed slightly, the light shifting toward evening, though the sun itself stayed hidden behind the ridge. Marlene walked a few paces away from the house, then stopped. Boone moved ahead of her this time. Not far. Just enough to circle once, then pause, his nose low to the ground near the edge of the clearing. Marlene watched him. His movements were different now. Focused. Searching. He followed a line she couldn't see. Across the yard. Toward the far edge where the fence once stood straight and even. Now, something was wrong. She walked toward him. The ground shifted slightly under her boots, damp in places where shade had held the cold longer. Boone stopped at the fence line, or what was left of it. Marlene reached him and saw. The wood posts had been cut. Not broken, not worn down by time. Cut, clean. Sharp edges where the grain split under a blade. 2 sections lay on the ground, wires slack, pulled aside. Her breath slowed, not from calm, from control. Boone stepped closer to the broken post, sniffed once, then again. His body stiffened slightly. His ears angled forward. Marlene looked down. There were tracks. Faint, but there. Boot prints pressed into the softer ground just beyond the fence line. Not old, not weathered. Recent, very recent. Boone let out a low, steady breath. Not a growl, but close. Marlene straightened. Her eyes moved across the tree line. Nothing moved. No sound. Just stillness. Too still. She turned back toward the house. Harold stood on the porch now, watching her. He didn't call out, didn't wave, just waited. Marlene walked back. Faster this time. Boone stayed close. Closer than before. When she reached the steps, she didn't slow. "You knew about this?" she asked. Harold's jaw tightened. Not yet. Marlene gestured behind her. The fence is cut. He stepped down from the porch immediately, moving past her toward the edge of the yard. Lila stayed inside, visible through the window, her figure still near the table. Marlene followed Harold. He crouched beside the broken post, running his hand along the clean edge. "Not weather," he said. "I know that." He nodded once. Boone stood just behind them, watching the trees again, not the fence now. Harold looked at the ground, at the tracks, then up, toward the direction the sedan had gone earlier. "They don't waste time," he said. Marlene crossed her arms. "They?" Harold stood slowly. "The ones who came today, that man? He's not the only one." Marlene let out a breath through her nose. He didn't say anything about cutting fences. He wouldn't. "Then what is this?" Harold looked at her. Pressure. The words settled. Clear, uncomplicated. Marlene glanced back at the house, at the chimney, smoke still rising. "They want me to leave." "They want the house empty," Harold said. Marlene's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's the same thing." Harold shook his head once. "No," he said, "it isn't." Marlene studied him. "What's the difference?" He gestured toward the broken fence. "If you leave, you can come back," he said. "If it's empty long enough, they make sure you don't." The meaning landed slowly. Marlene looked again at the posts, at the clean cuts, at the tracks. This wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was deliberate. Boone moved suddenly. Not far, but enough. He stepped past the fence line, nose down again, following the scent trail a few yards into the trees. Marlene stiffened. "Boone." He stopped immediately, looked back at her, then returned, but his body stayed tight now. Alert. Something out there didn't sit right with him. That was enough. Marlene turned back toward the house. Her pace was different now, more direct, more certain. Inside, the warmth hit her again, but it didn't feel the same as before. It felt defended, like something that needed protecting. Lila looked up as she entered. Her eyes moved from Marlene to Harold. She didn't ask. She already knew something had changed. Marlene crossed the room and picked up the paper from the table, the one with the deadline. 45 days. She looked at it again, then at the notebook, then at the door. Everything connected now. Not fully, but enough. "They're not waiting for the time to run out," she said. Harold closed the door behind him. "No, they're moving now." "Yes." Marlene folded the paper once more. Slower this time, more deliberate. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Boone settled near the doorway, but not fully down. Half resting. Ready. Watching. Marlene looked around the kitchen again. At the table. The stove. The photograph. All of it. Not just memory, not just history, something active, something still in motion. "They think I'll leave," she said. No one answered, because they didn't need to. Marlene nodded once, then set the paper back down. Flat. Centered. As if placing it where it belonged. Her voice, when it came again, was quieter, but steadier. "They're wrong." The fire cracked behind her. The kettle shifted, and outside, the broken fence stood open to the trees, waiting. But inside, nothing moved. Nothing gave. Not yet. The night settled in without ceremony. No sudden darkness, no sharp drop in temperature, just a slow fading of light through the trees until the sky turned the color of old steel and the house became the only place that held warmth. Marlene didn't leave, not the porch, not the kitchen. She moved through the house once, quietly, as if reacquainting herself with something that had never fully let her go. The hallway creaked the same way. The back room still held the faint scent of cedar and dust. The bedroom door, her grandmother's, stopped halfway when opened, catching on the same warped section of floor. Everything was familiar, and none of it was. Boone followed her. Not close enough to crowd, not far enough to lose her. He checked each room once, paused at corners, stood still longer than usual near the back wall, then moved on without signaling. When they returned to the kitchen, Harold had already set out tools on the table. Simple ones. Hammer, nails, a length of wire. Marlene glanced at them. "The fence," he said. She nodded. They worked in the dark first. Lantern light, flashlight beams cutting across the ground, the cold settling deeper into the soil. The broken posts went back into place unevenly. The wire stretched tight again, though not perfectly, not the way it had been before. It didn't matter. That wasn't the point. The point was that it stood. When they finished, Marlene's hands were stiff. Her back ached. Her breath came slower. She didn't complain, didn't stop. Harold didn't either. They worked side by side without speaking, the rhythm of movement enough to carry them through. Boone stayed near the tree line, watching, always watching. By the time they went inside again, the fire had burned lower. Lila sat in the chair near the stove, her hands wrapped loosely around a blanket that had slipped from her shoulders. She looked smaller than before, not physically. Something else, something in the way she held herself. Marlene noticed. "You should be lying down," she said. Lila gave a small shake of her head. "Later." Her voice was softer now, thinner. Marlene stepped closer. "You don't look well." "I'm tired. That's not the same thing." Lila didn't argue, but she didn't move either. Harold added another piece of wood to the stove. The fire flared slightly, then settled again. "We'll get her to rest," he said. Marlene nodded, but her eyes stayed on Lila. Watching. Measuring. The same way Boone had been watching the house. The same way she had once watched Patience. Before she stopped. Before she walked away from that part of her life. She didn't think about that now. Didn't want to. But something about the way Lila breathed, shallow, careful, made it harder to ignore. "Come on," Marlene said gently. She helped Lila stand. Slowly, carefully. Lila's hand rested lightly against her arm, not heavy but not steady either. They moved toward the back room, each step measured, each breath noticeable. Boone followed halfway, then stopped, stayed near the doorway. Guarding. Marlene helped Lila sit on the edge of the bed, pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. "You'll stay warm here," she said. Lila nodded. Her eyes lingered on Marlene's face for a moment longer than expected. "You didn't have to come back," she said quietly. Marlene didn't answer. Not right away. She adjusted the blanket again, tucked it in at the sides. "I know," she said finally. Lila studied her, then gave a small nod, as if that was enough. When Marlene stepped back into the kitchen, Harold was still standing by the stove. He didn't ask how Lila was. He already knew. "She's been like that a while," he said. Marlene leaned against the counter. "How long?" Harold didn't answer immediately. "Long enough." Marlene exhaled slowly. "You should have told someone. We did what we could." "That's not the same." Harold looked at her. "It is up here." The words echoed what he'd said before, but they land differently now. Marlene nodded once. Her gaze drifted to the tools still sitting on the table, then to the notebook, then to the paper. 45 days. She picked it up again, held it for a moment, then set it back down. Her body felt heavier now, not just tired. It had been a long time since she'd done this kind of work. Her hands still remembered, but her back didn't. Her knees didn't. Every movement carried a small reminder of that. Still, she hadn't stopped. Wouldn't. Boone moved closer, lowered himself near her feet. This time he rested fully, not asleep, but settled, his breathing slow, even. Marlene looked down at him. "You're not relaxing," she said quietly. He didn't respond, but his ears twitched slightly. Listening. Always listening. The house creaked softly as the temperature dropped. The fire shifted. The kettle gave a faint rattle. Everything continued. Nothing paused. Marlene straightened, walked toward the sink, turned on the tap. Cold water ran. Clear. She rinsed her hands slowly, watching the dirt wash away. The small cuts along her fingers stung slightly. She dried them on a towel that had hung there for years. Same hook. Same spot. She remembered it now. Clearer than before. Everything coming back in pieces. Not all at once. Just enough. Harold sat down finally. The chair groaned under him. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "She would have liked this," he said. Marlene glanced at him. "What? You staying?" She didn't answer, didn't agree, didn't deny it. She walked back to the table, sat down. The notebook rested where she'd left it. Closed now. Quiet. But not finished. Nothing in this house felt finished. Not the repairs, not the stories, not the choices that had been made, and not the ones still ahead. Marlene rested her hands on the table, felt the worn wood beneath her palms. Solid. Real. Boone shifted slightly at her feet. Closer. The fire burned low. The night deepened. And somewhere beyond the fence, the dark waited. But inside, something else had taken hold. Not comfort. Not yet. But something close to it. Something steadier than before. And Marlene understood one thing clearly now. Staying here wasn't going to be easy. And leaving was no longer simple. Morning came without color. A pale gray light slid through the kitchen window, flattening everything it touched. The mountains beyond the glass looked closer than they had the day before, as if the night had drawn them in. Marlene woke at the table. Her head rested on her arms, the wood still warm from the fire that had burned low through the night. Boone lay at her feet, already awake, his eyes open, watching the room as if he had been there the whole time. The house felt quieter. Not empty. Just waiting. She sat up slowly. Her back protested first, then her shoulders, the kind of stiffness that came from work, not sleep. For a moment, she didn't move, Then she looked toward the hallway. The door to the back room stood slightly open. No sound from inside. Marlene stood. Boone rose with her. They moved down the hall together, the floorboards announcing each step in soft, familiar creaks. She pushed the door open. Lila lay in bed, eyes closed, the blanket still pulled high around her shoulders. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Harold sat beside her, leaning forward, his hands resting on his knees. He looked up as Marlene entered. "She's resting," he said quietly. Marlene nodded. She stepped closer. Watched Lila for a moment longer than necessary, then stepped back. "She needs a doctor," Marlene said. Harold's gaze dropped briefly. "We don't get many of those up here. That's not an answer. It's the one we have." Marlene didn't push. Not yet. She turned and walked back into the kitchen. The paper was still on the table. 45 days. The number looked different in daylight. Sharper. More defined. She picked it up again. Read it fully this time. Every line, every condition, every consequence. The words didn't change, but something inside her did. Boone moved to the door, sat, waited. His attention shifted before she heard it. The sound came a moment later. An engine. Different from the one the day before. Heavier, slower. Marlene stepped outside. The morning air cut deeper than before. Colder, cleaner. A pickup truck rolled into view at the edge of the drive. Dust rose behind it in a thin cloud. It stopped a few yards from the house. The door opened. A man stepped out. Older than the one from yesterday, broader, slower in his movements but not uncertain. He removed his hat. Looked up at the house, then at Marlene. "You the Whitaker woman?" he asked. Marlene nodded once. "I am." He walked closer, boots crunching on gravel. "Name's Daniel Cross," he said. "County office." Marlene's grip tightened slightly on the paper. "You're here about this?" He gave a short nod. "Among other things." Boone stood now, not aggressive, but present. Daniel noticed, gave the dog a brief glance, then returned his attention to Marlene. "I figured you'd show up eventually," he said. "Didn't think it'd be this close to the deadline." Marlene didn't respond. Daniel continued. "Most people wait until the last week, or don't come at all. I'm here now. That you are." He shifted his weight slightly, looked past her, at the house, at the chimney, at the yard. His eyes lingered on the repaired fence, then moved back. "You planning to stay?" he asked. Marlene met his gaze. "Yes." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Then you should know what you're up against." Marlene stepped forward slightly. "I already do." He shook his head. "No. You know the paper. You don't know the pattern." The word caught. "Pattern?" Daniel exhaled, took a step closer, lowered his voice. "This isn't the first place they've gone after," he said. "Not even close." Marlene felt something shift again. "How many?" "Enough. That's not a number. It's not meant to be." Marlene's jaw tightened. "They've been buying up land across this ridge for years," Daniel continued. "Piece by piece. Always the same approach." "What approach?" "Pressure. Time. Wear people down until they walk away." Marlene glanced at the fence, then back at him. "And if they don't?" Daniel's expression didn't change. They make it harder not to. The meaning settled in. Clear, direct. Marlene folded the paper slowly, held it in her hand. Daniel looked toward the house again. "You're not the only one who's tried to hold on to something up here," he said. "But you're one of the last." Marlene's eyes narrowed slightly. "Last?" He nodded. "Most sold. Some didn't have a choice. Some thought they did." Silence stretched between them. Boone shifted, stepped closer to Marlene's side. Daniel noticed, gave a small nod. "Smart dog," he said. Then his gaze moved back to Marlene. "You got records?" he asked. "What kind?" "Anything that shows what's been going on here. Payments, history, disputes." Marlene hesitated, then looked back toward the kitchen. At the table, at the notebook. "I might," she said. Daniel nodded. "Then you're going to need them." "For what?" "For when this stops being about money." Marlene's grip tightened slightly. "And what does it become?" Daniel met her eyes. A fight. The word hung there. Simple. Unavoidable. Marlene didn't look away. "I'm not leaving," she said. Daniel held her gaze a moment longer, then gave a small, almost respectful nod. "Then don't wait too long to decide how you're staying." He turned, walked back toward his truck. The engine started. Faded. Gone. Marlene stood in the yard, the paper still in her hand. Boone pressed lightly against her leg. Behind her, the house stood. Unmoved, steady, holding everything it had always held. She turned back toward it, walked inside. The notebook sat where she'd left it, quiet, closed, waiting. Marlene placed the paper beside it, lined them up. Side by side. The past, the present. Both asking for something, both refusing to wait. Harold stepped into the doorway behind her. "You're going to need help," he said. Marlene nodded. "I know." She opened the notebook again. Not to read, to show, to understand, to use, because whatever came next wasn't going to stay quiet. And neither was she. The hearing took place in a room that didn't match the weight of what was being decided. Low ceiling, fluorescent lights, folding chairs arranged in uneven rows, a long table at the front with 3 people seated behind it, papers stacked in quiet, orderly piles. Marlene stood near the back for a moment before moving forward. Boone stayed beside her, not close enough to crowd, close enough to be felt. The room wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. Harold sat in the second row. Lila wasn't there. She hadn't been strong enough to make the trip, but her absence felt present in a way that filled the space beside him. A few others sat scattered across the chairs, people Marlene didn't recognize. Or maybe she did. Not by name, by place. By the way they carried themselves. By the way they looked toward the front of the room without speaking. Daniel Cross stood near the side wall, arms folded, watching everything without interrupting. At the table, the man from before sat in a dark suit. Composed, patient, certain, the same certainty he had brought to the porch, the same certainty he had expected to win. Marlene walked to the front, set the notebook on the table, then the paper beside it. 45 days, still there, still real. The woman at the center of the panel looked up. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, "you've been notified of the outstanding balance on this property." "I have," Marlene said, And you understand the consequences if it remains unpaid? I do. The woman nodded. Then you may proceed. Marlene rested her hand on the notebook, felt the worn cover beneath her fingers, then opened it. Not quickly, not dramatically, just deliberately. These are my grandmother's records, she said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't strain. It carried because it was steady. She kept them herself, quietly, for years. The man in the suit shifted slightly, barely noticeable, but enough. Marlene continued. She didn't talk about what she did. She didn't announce it. She wrote it down and moved on. She turned the notebook toward the panel. Pages filled with names. Dates, amounts, no embellishment, no explanation, just fact. These aren't debts, she said. They're decisions. Silence followed. Not empty. Listening. Marlene didn't look at the man, not yet. She looked at the people sitting behind the table, at their hands, their pens, their expressions. She didn't fall behind on her taxes because she forgot, Marlene said. She made a choice, over and over again, to keep other people standing when they couldn't do it alone. The man in the suit leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, this hearing concerns property delinquency, not... Marlene turned to him. Just enough. Not fully. I know what it concerns, she said. Her voice didn't change, but something in the room did. She turned back, kept going. I didn't know any of this, she said. I wasn't here. I didn't see it. I didn't understand it. She paused. Not for effect. For breath. But I do now. The notebook stayed open. Waiting. The room stayed quiet. Then, a chair moved. A man in the third row stood. Older. Hat in his hands. I knew her, he said. His voice carried the weight of years. She paid for my roof when it caved in. Didn't tell anyone. Just showed up with the money and told me to fix it before winter. He sat back down. Another voice followed. A woman near the side. She covered my sister's hospital bill, she said. Said it was from a friend. I knew better. Then another. And another. No speeches. No performances. Just pieces. Fragments of a life that had been lived quietly, but not invisibly. The panel listened. The man in the suit stopped moving, stopped interrupting. Because he couldn't. Not here, not now. Marlene didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The notebook did that for her. The people finished it. When the room finally settled, the woman at the table removed her glasses, set them down, looked at the pages, then at Marlene. The balance remains, she said. Marlene nodded. I understand. But, the woman continued, given the evidence presented here and the circumstances surrounding the accumulation of that balance, she paused. Not for effect. For accuracy. This office will place a temporary hold on the seizure process, pending further review. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed and stayed. The man in the suit sat back. Still composed, but no longer certain. Marlene closed the notebook. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just enough. Boone shifted beside her. Relaxed. For the first time since they had arrived. The room didn't erupt. No applause, no celebration, just a quiet shift, like something heavy had been set down. Outside, the air felt different, not warmer, but clearer. Harold stepped beside her. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Marlene looked toward the mountains, then back toward the road, then home. Weeks passed, not quickly, not slowly, just steady. The house stood. Repairs continued. The fence held. The fire burned. Marlene stayed. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, because leaving no longer made sense. One evening, she stood by the stove, placed another log inside, watched the flames take hold. Boone lay near the door, head down, eyes half closed, calm, finally calm. The room carried the same smell it always had: wood smoke, warmth, something older beneath it, something that didn't fade. Marlene moved to the table, opened the notebook, turned to a blank page. She held the pen for a moment, then began to write. Not a list, not a record, just a line. Simple, clear. She set the pen down, closed the book, rested her hand on the cover. The fire cracked softly behind her. Outside, the mountains stood where they always had, unmoved, waiting. Inside, the house breathed steady, alive. And for the first time in decades, Marlene didn't feel like she had returned to something she lost. She felt like she had finally arrived somewhere she was meant to stay. Sometimes what we walk away from isn't just a place. It's a part of ourselves we don't yet know how to carry. And sometimes, coming back isn't about fixing the past. It's about choosing not to leave again. She felt like she had finally arrived somewhere she was meant to stay. Sometimes what we walk away from isn't just a place. It's a part of ourselves we don't yet know how to carry. And sometimes, coming back isn't about fixing the past. It's about choosing not to leave again. The fire settled into a steady burn, the kind that didn't need tending every minute. Marlene stood there a while, not moving, just listening, to the wood, to the quiet, to the house breathing around her like it always had. Boone lifted his head once, glanced toward the pantry, then back to her. Not alert anymore, just aware, like he had done his part and didn't need to prove it. She understood that now. He hadn't found something hidden because he was looking for answers. He just didn't ignore what didn't feel right.
Marlene rested her hand on the table, the same spot where the notebook had sat for years without her. On that time, she thought she had been the one who left something behind, but it hadn't gone anywhere. It had been here, waiting, not for apologies, not for her explanations, just for her to come back and see it. She glanced at the chair across from her, the one no one had sat in for a long time, and for a moment she didn't feel the emptiness in it. She felt the presence of someone who had never really left, and that was enough. Bond let out a slow breath and rested his head back down. Outside, the mountain held its silence. Inside, the fire held its place. And Marlene stayed exactly where she was, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because for the first time she finally understood what it meant to remain. So let me ask you something. When something in your life quietly stops making sense, do you walk away from it, or do you stay long enough to find out what it's been trying to show you?